I was around a lot of people that that I saw doing a lot of stuff, a lot of wild stuff to themselves, and really hurt themselves, hurt their gift,
Rick James used to joke that his music came from somewhere not of this world, but no one understood how literal that was, until Teena Marie finally admitted what she saw. She said Rick would sometimes stop mid-sentence, turn his head, and speak to something standing in the corner, something only he could see. The night he almost died from an overdose in 1981, a nurse claimed Rick screamed as if invisible hands were dragging him under the hospital bed. In 1993, a studio engineer swore Rick walked out of the booth with tears running down his face and whispered, "I already signed. I can't go back." For decades, the rumors followed him like shadows. The bargain he hinted at, the figure he said protected him, the nightmares he swore were real. The industry kept quiet. His friends avoided questions. And Teena, his closest confidant, carried a secret that haunted her for years. Now she's finally telling the truth. And what she revealed changes everything. Chapter 1, 1978, the night of the offer. Everyone remembers the music. No one talks about the room. What Teena Marie revealed forces us to go back to the beginning, before the fame, before the scandals, before the madness swallowed Rick whole. Back to 1978. Back to the night some fans now call the offer. It happened in the Hollywood Hills, inside a mansion Rick James rented during the recording of his breakout album, Come Get It. The house sat alone on a slope of dry earth, surrounded by dead palm leaves and a wind that never seemed to stop rattling the windows. People said the place had a strange stillness, even on warm nights, like sound refused to settle there. That night, Rick invited only a handful of people, 2 Motown staffers, a dealer he trusted too much, and Teena Marie, who had just begun writing with him. She later said the energy in the house felt wrong the moment she stepped in. The lights flickered. The air felt colder than outside, and Rick kept looking over his shoulder as if someone had arrived before the guests did. Around 11 p.m., Rick disappeared. He walked down a hallway, turned right, opened the last door, and vanished into a room no one else had been allowed to enter. A room he always kept locked. A room he once joked was where the spirits hang out. People laughed at the time. They stopped laughing years later. 30 minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. Teena knocked on the door. No answer. A Motown rep, known in rumors only as DD, tried the knob and found it ice cold, like metal pulled from a freezer. Inside, they heard nothing. Not footsteps, not movement, just a low thrum, like the hum of electricity or the whisper of someone breathing very quietly. At 2:17 a.m., the door finally opened. Rick stepped out slowly, staring straight ahead, moving like someone walking out of a trance. His eyes were wet, but not from crying. Teena said they looked burned, as if he had been staring at something too bright or too dark. He didn't speak at first. He just stood in the hallway, chest rising sharply, hands trembling slightly. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "I'm untouchable now?" No one knew what he meant. No one dared to ask. Teena later described that moment in a way that never left her mind. He looked relieved and terrified, like he'd just shaken hands with something he shouldn't have. The house behaved strangely after that. One light bulb exploded without anyone touching it. The stereo in the living room switched on by itself and played a single sustained note, something no one recognized, something that wasn't on any tape. A glass fell off a table and shattered even though no one was near it. People froze. Rick didn't react. He went straight into the studio room and recorded what fans now call the missing take, a raw, frantic riff on a bass groove he said came to him in the locked room. According to one witness, Rick muttered repeatedly between breaths, "He gave it to me. He gave it to me." When Teena asked who he was, Rick only smiled and said, "You'll understand later." But the most disturbing part came when they played back the tape. At the 17-second mark, deep under the bass line, there was a faint whisper. A voice, not Rick's, not Teena's, not anyone in the room. Just 4 words. "Do it, Rick. Do it." The engineer rewound it 7 times. Same whisper, same tone, same impossible presence. Rick told him to erase it immediately. The engineer tried. The file corrupted. The voice remained. 2 weeks later, that engineer quit Motown entirely and left Los Angeles without explanation. He later told a friend he saw something in that house that didn't belong in this world. Rick never talked about that night in public, but everything in his life shifted after it. The drugs got harder, the behavior got stranger, the temper grew sharper. And late at night, in studios or backstage dressing rooms, Rick would stare at corners of the room and whisper to something only he could see. The offer, whatever it was, had been accepted. And Teena would spend the next 25 years trying to make sense of what she witnessed. Because from that night forward, Rick James didn't rise by talent alone. Something else rose with him. Something he couldn't control. Something he couldn't outrun. Something that kept coming back. Chapter 2, 1981, The Shadow in the ICU. Everything changed on August 10, 1981. Rick James was in Los Angeles finishing sessions for Street Songs, a record that would define him when the overdose hit. He had spent the previous night moving from party to party across Beverly Hills, a whirlwind of cocaine, cognac va adrenaline. By 3:40 a.m., he collapsed in the hallway of the Peninsula Hotel, his body shaking violently as paramedics fought to stabilize his heartbeat. Witnesses said his eyes rolled back and his fingers curled inward. But what terrified them wasn't the overdose. It was the way Rick kept looking over their shoulders, as if something was standing behind them. At 3:58 a.m., the ambulance pulled into Cedars Sinai Medical Center. The hallways smelled like bleach and metal, and the fluorescent lights flickered slightly each time the gurney rolled underneath. Nurses rushed him into ICU room 214. A young nurse named Carter, whose interview quietly circulated on musician forums years later, said Rick arrived fighting something none of us could see. He wasn't fighting the staff. He wasn't fighting the drugs. He was clawing downward, nails scraping the metal railing, screaming, "Get him off me! He's pulling me down!" Carter tried to reassure him, but Rick stared at the floor under the bed and cried like he saw a hand reaching up. His pulse crashed twice that morning. Each time the machines flatlined, the room temperature dropped sharply enough that another nurse complained her breath fogged. At 4:12 a.m., the heart monitor spiked on its own before any intervention, something Carter said she had only seen when a patient isn't alone. By sunrise, Rick was unconscious, chest rising painfully, skin pale under the flickering light. Doctors told Teena Marie he might not make it through the day. She arrived at 7:23 a.m., hair still damp from rushing out the door, and stood frozen in the doorway because she said the air inside room 214 felt thick, like walking into someone else's nightmare. When she approached him, Rick opened his eyes briefly, pupils dilated, breath trembling, and whispered, "He came for me. He came to collect." Teena grabbed his hand, but Rick jerked away sharply, staring at the far corner of the room where the shadows clustered beneath a cabinet. Teena later told a friend Rick wasn't looking at empty space. He was looking straight at someone. At 9:06 a.m., a respiratory therapist entered to adjust the ventilator. He swore in a private statement years later that a dark shape moved behind the curtain. Not a person, not a reflection, something heavier. But the cameras didn't capture anything except static for 10 seconds. That static, according to a technician, appeared only in Rick's room and nowhere else in ICU that morning. The moment Rick stabilized around noon, he asked Teena Marie for a piece of paper. His hands shook so violently she had to hold the clipboard for him as he wrote a single sentence. Not dead, protected. He refused to explain. He refused to talk. But every time Teena stepped out for water, she returned to find him staring at the floor or the ceiling, as if following something crawling just out of her sight. Rick was discharged 5 days later. The staff felt relief. Teena felt dread. And Rick? He walked out of Cedars-Sinai on August 15, 1981, with the same quiet sentence he had said the night of the offer. I can't go back now. Whatever followed him into that hospital, whatever he believed pulled at him from under the bed, was still with him. And Teena Marie would later admit that from that moment on, Rick James didn't just fear his addictions. He feared something that wanted him dead, but couldn't quite touch him yet. Chapter 3, 1983, 1985, The Studio Haunting. After the night of the offer and the ICU incident in 1981, Rick James walked back into the studio like a man split between two worlds. To most people, he was the same loud, charismatic, unstoppable funk star burning through Los Angeles. But to those closest to him, especially Teena Marie, there was something different, something heavier, like the air around him carried its own shadow. And by 1983, that shadow began showing itself inside the very rooms where Rick felt most powerful. Studios were Rick James's church. He worshipped bass lines and lived inside drum machines. But around November 1983, strange things started happening at Record Plant. At first, they were small, a sudden drop in temperature while the air conditioning was off, a faint ringing in the booth, even when all equipment was muted, an odd vibration that ran through the floorboards for 2 or 3 seconds at a time. Engineers laughed it off, blaming wiring or tired ears. Yet every night the disturbances grew more pointed, more deliberate, as if something was learning how to make itself known. On the night of November 18, 1983, Rick was recording new vocals, while Teena Marie waited in the lounge marking corrections on a lyric sheet. Around 12:40 a.m., the building felt unusually still. Even the usual hum of Sunset Boulevard sounded distant, like the city itself was holding its breath. Teena suddenly heard Rick's voice break mid-phrase. Not a mistake, not a crack, a sound like someone choking back fear. She looked up and saw the engineer frozen, eyes wide, staring at the monitor. Something was wrong. When Teena stepped into the hallway, she expected to hear Rick cursing or throwing a mic stand like he sometimes did when frustrated. Instead, the hallway was dead silent. She reached the booth window and saw Rick standing completely still, arms rigid at his sides, staring at the dark corner of the room. Not toward the mic, not toward the console, straight into the corner, as if someone stood there waiting. When the engineer clicked the talkback and asked if he was okay, Rick whispered something too soft for the room mic to catch. Teena pressed her ear to the glass. She heard it clearly. He's in here again. Right then, the lights flickered once, twice, and snapped off. The booth went black, the only illumination a red diode pulsing on the console like some kind of artificial heartbeat. Someone gasped. Someone else cursed under their breath. Nobody moved. When the emergency light finally activated a few seconds later, Rick's body was no longer upright. He was crouched in the center of the booth, arms wrapped tightly around himself, head shaking. Teena rushed inside and felt the temperature drop instantly. Rick's skin was ice cold, and he kept glancing at the same corner as if something tall and shapeless hovered just out of sight. That night, the session ended early, but the fear stayed, and the haunting escalated. By March 1984, Rick had moved into Motown's Los Angeles facility, specifically the infamous Red Room, known for its suffocatingly dry acoustic. Artists loved it for precision, engineers hated it after midnight. They said the room changed at night, its angles felt wrong, and the silence became too heavy. On March 27th, while tracking vocal layers, the engineer noticed something deeply unsettling. A faint second voice underneath Rick's lead. Not a harmony, not tape hiss. A whisper timed perfectly to Rick's breath, almost coaxing him. When the engineer isolated the frequency and raised the gain, the room filled with a faint murmur stretching through static. Do it again. The engineer ripped off his headphones immediately. Teena burst out crying. Rick didn't react at all. He just smiled and said, "It's just encouragement." People stopped laughing after that. Throughout summer 1984, more incidents followed. On July 9th, around 2 a.m., the entire studio filled with a sharp sulfur smell, burnt, chemical, unnatural. A janitor swore he saw smoke coiling under the booth door despite no equipment malfunctioning. When he opened the door, the booth was empty except for Rick, standing perfectly still beneath the overhead light, staring at the ceiling with eyes so glassy, Teena later said, "They looked borrowed." The smell vanished instantly, but Rick whispered, without turning, "He doesn't like breaks." From that moment, the shadow wasn't hiding, it was participating, and the most terrifying shift happened in February 1985. Rick arrived late one night, trembling, muttering about him getting closer. Teena followed him into the lounge, and when he shrugged off his leather coat, she saw long, fresh scratch marks carving down his back. 4 parallel lines, too deep to be accidental, too human to be imagined, too violent to be dismissed. She touched them, and Rick winced as if they weren't wounds but reminders. He refused to explain, refused treatment, refused to speak of it at all. He lit a joint, exhaled a shaky breath thick with accusation, and murmured, "You don't run from the one who gives you the gifts." Teena would remember that sentence for the rest of her life because Rick didn't sound afraid. He sounded resigned. Later that year, a Motown intern discovered an unlabeled reel containing nothing but slow, rhythmic breathing. Long inhales, longer exhales, each cycle unnervingly measured. At the 3:14 mark, a voice whispered a single word, "James," followed by another phrase too distorted to fully decipher. The intern listened 3 times, then destroyed the tape. But he never forgot how the whisper sounded like it wasn't recorded at all. Like someone leaned directly into his ear. By 1986, studio staff began refusing to work overnight with Rick. It wasn't the drugs. They had worked with worse. It wasn't the temper. Every legend had one. It was the way the rooms changed when he entered, the way shadows lengthened, the way cold air moved in from nowhere, the way every engineer felt watched, not by Rick, but by something hovering behind him. Teena Marie summed it up years later when she finally spoke about it. People think Rick James was haunted by his mistakes. They're wrong. He was haunted by something that thought it owned him, and whatever that thing was, it knew exactly where to find him. And the haunting was just beginning. Chapter 4, 1991, The Prison Conjuring. There's a saying among inmates, if something is already haunting you, prison doesn't cage it, it concentrates it. And Rick James would learn that truth in the most terrifying way. He entered Folsom State Prison on November 3, 1991. The sky was gray, the air cold, and the guards treated him like another number in the intake line. To the world, Rick was a disgraced superstar, serving time for assault and kidnapping. But to Teena Marie, who spoke to him the night before he surrendered, Rick was a man who believed his visitor would follow him inside. His last words to her before the handcuffs clicked were, "He won't stay out here. He comes everywhere I go." From the moment Rick crossed the prison gates, the atmosphere felt wrong. A guard later claimed that when they processed Rick's belongings, the temperature in the intake room dropped nearly 10 degrees. The security cameras captured a subtle, static-like flicker, only in the footage taken during the minutes Rick stood in place. Not before, not after. Just while he was there. Some officers joked about a musician curse, but others avoided eye contact, refusing to stay near him longer than necessary. Rick was assigned to cell 218, a stark concrete room with a metal bunk bolted to the wall, a narrow window, and paint peeling like sunburned skin. But it was the corner, the far left corner behind the toilet, that unsettled him immediately. He would later tell Teena over a collect call. He was already waiting. The first incident happened on the 4th night. Rick had been pacing back and forth, restless from withdrawal tremors. The prison lights cut at 11 p.m. sharp, but at 3:33 a.m., a time Rick always feared, the bulb in his cell flickered awake without warning, glowing a strange, dim red as if powered by something not connected to the prison grid. His cellmate, a man named Cortez, jolted awake and yelled for the guards, but the hallway cameras showed every light steady and normal. Only Rick's cell glowed faintly, like a furnace with no heat. Rick stood by the bars, breathing hard, staring into the dark corner. Cortez later told inmates in the yard that Rick whispered another name in the darkness. James, James, as if answering someone no human could see. The next morning, Cortez demanded a transfer. The guards didn't argue, but moving the cellmate didn't stop the incidents. In December 1991, around 1:40 a.m., officers conducting a routine check claimed they heard someone speaking softly inside cell 218. Rick was clearly asleep, sprawled on the bunk, mouth open, breathing heavily. Yet another voice, a low masculine murmur with long pauses between syllables, echoed faintly off the concrete. When the guards unlocked the door and stepped inside, the voice stopped instantly. The temperature dropped so fast that both men felt their breath cloud. One guard reported seeing what he thought was a figure crouched in the corner, but the flashlight revealed only emptiness. The report was dismissed as exhaustion. But guards don't scare easily, and word spread quickly on the tiers. James got something in there with him. By January 1992, Rick's behavior deteriorated in ways that frightened even the hardened inmates. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating regularly. Sometimes he stared at his own reflection in the metal sink for long stretches, whispering fractured sentences like fragments of a conversation. I didn't ask for you. You can't keep me here. I already gave you what you wanted. Other times he refused to shower alone, insisting the lights flickered when he was left in the tiled room. A correctional officer confirmed that during one of Rick's showers, the water suddenly blasted ice cold, and the lights surged so violently the ballast popped. No other bathroom in the block malfunctioned, just Rick's. Then came the incident that changed everything. On March 2, 1992, during a storm that rattled the old metal gates, the prison endured a brief electrical outage. Emergency lights flicked on across every wing, except one. D Block stayed pitch black for 25 seconds. It was during that blackout that several inmates began yelling for help, claiming someone was moving inside the corridor. They said they saw a tall silhouette glide past their cells without footsteps. They said it paused in front of cell 218. When power returned, Rick was found on the floor, curled on his side, clutching his chest, whispering, "He found me. He found me." His pulse was erratic. He refused medical treatment beyond basic checks, but the guard who escorted him back to his bunk said Rick was trembling, like someone touched his spine. Teena Marie visited him 2 weeks later. At first, Rick refused to step into the visitation room. When he finally did, Teena saw something in his eyes that shook her to the core. An exhaustion that wasn't physical, but spiritual, like he'd been fighting something every night and losing ground. He leaned close to her and whispered, "He doesn't need the studio. He doesn't need the house. He found a way inside here, too." Teena asked him who. Rick shook his head. "He won't let me say his name in here." Prison psychologists chalked everything up to withdrawal trauma and paranoia. But the staff, men who had seen stabbings, riots, fires, and madness, avoided Rick's cell after dark. One guard refused to walk past it entirely, telling his supervisor, "It feels like stepping into someone else's nightmare." By the end of Rick's sentence in 1996, the haunting incidents had all but scarred the facility's rumor history. Officers spoke in hushed tones about the James nights, the nights when the hallway temperature dropped only outside his door, or when the cameras caught faint static shimmering around his cell, or when the guard dogs refused to walk past 218. When Rick was finally released in August 1996, the warden himself reportedly said, "Whatever was in there with him, I hope it leaves with him." No one laughed. Rick stepped outside the prison gates, thinner, older, and carrying something invisible behind his eyes. Teena Marie hugged him tightly, but even she later admitted, "When he came out, I swear it looked like someone walked out behind him. Something that shouldn't have been there. Something that didn't belong to the world outside. Something that had followed him into the darkness and now followed him back out. And Rick James would spend the rest of his life trying and failing to outrun it." Chapter 5, 2004. The Final Warning. By the early 2000s, Rick James looked like a man who had fought too many wars, some of them with the world, many of them with himself, and one of them with something no one else could see. After prison, after rehab, after the injuries, after the chaos, he tried to rebuild a life that never belonged to him entirely. But Teena Marie always believed he knew one thing for certain. Whatever had followed him for decades was getting closer. And 2004 was the year it wanted him back. The last months of his life felt cursed. Rick moved between meetings, small studio sessions, and medical appointments with an unease that never left his shoulders. Teena saw it instantly. His eyes darted toward empty corners again. His breath shortened when rooms got too quiet. And more than once, he told her in a low, hoarse murmur, "He's waiting. He knows I'm tired." Teena hated when he said that word. No name, no explanation, just a presence. July 23, 2004. Teena visited Rick at his Los Angeles home. The place felt colder than usual, even with the summer heat outside. The windows were shut, the air heavy with something old, stale, unmoving. Rick sat in a recliner, shoulders slumped, staring at the floor like the tiles were telling him something. When she asked how he felt, he didn't answer. He just pointed toward the hallway. Teena later admitted she didn't see anything, but she felt something, a change in the pressure, like the house itself was exhaling. Rick whispered, "He's been here all week. He doesn't hide anymore." And then, for the first time in all the years she'd known him, Teena felt afraid for him, not of him. The week before Rick died, strange things were reported by people in his inner circle. A home studio computer kept turning on by itself, playing an unfinished demo with a distorted, low moan in the final seconds. A housekeeper claimed she saw a shadow move across the hallway even though no one else was inside. And one night, Rick woke up screaming, not in pain, but in terror, insisting someone had been sitting on the edge of his bed, whispering. When the lights flicked on, no one was there, but the indentation on the mattress remained. Teena visited him again on August 3rd. Rick's voice was weak, but his fear was strong enough to fill the room. He told her, "He said the time's up. I heard him last night." Teena begged him to get help. Rick shook his head slowly. "Help can't stop this." 2 days later, on August 5th, a neighbor claimed they heard a loud bang come from Rick's house around 1 a.m., followed by sudden silence. Some thought it was furniture falling. Others believed it was Rick collapsing. But one neighbor, a woman who lived alone, said she heard something else first. A voice, a deep voice, not shouting, not angry, but calling Rick's real name. Not Rick, not Super Freak, but James. On the morning of August 6, 2004, Rick James was found dead in his bedroom. The official cause, cardiac failure. The toxicology report listed multiple substances, but none in fatal doses. Nothing that should have killed him. Nothing that explained the look on his face, a mix of exhaustion and fear, as if he'd spent the night fighting something no one else in the house could see. And that's what disturbed Teena the most. She told a friend, off the record, that Rick didn't die in his sleep the way people wanted to believe. She believed he knew something was coming for him. She believed he felt it enter the room. And she believed he recognized it, even in death. When Teena saw him one last time, she noticed something strange. The room was freezing, not cold from the air conditioner, cold like a winter cave, cold like breath turning white, cold like a presence had lingered. She whispered goodbye, but she later confessed it felt like she wasn't the only one listening. And then, months later, after she finally allowed herself to talk about the things she saw, the voices she heard, the moments she could never explain, she revealed the things she'd kept quiet for years. Rick once told her, "If he ever comes to collect me, you'll know. You'll feel it in the room." Teena never said what she felt that day, but the look on her face when she talked about it said everything. Decades of whispers, decades of shadows, decades of hauntings. From the Hollywood Hills in 1978 to the ICU in 1981 to the studios in '83, all the way to Folsom Prison, and finally his lonely bedroom in Dallas 2004. Something walked beside Rick James. Something he thought gave him power, then slowly took everything else. And when Teena Marie finally revealed the truth she'd hidden for half a lifetime, fans understood why Rick never outran his demons. He wasn't running from addiction. He wasn't running from fame. He was running from a pact he believed he made, a pact he believed he couldn't break, a pact that, in the end, came to collect. So after hearing the evidence Teena Marie carried for decades, what do you think really followed Rick James? Was it guilt? Was it paranoia? Or was it something far darker that began in a locked room in 1978 and never let go? Tell me in the comments what theory you believe. And if you want more true dark files from Black music history, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. The next story might be even darker. Just remember, some legends rise from talent. Others rise from something we're not meant to name.